Good Things with BBB helps you be a better business.
I'm Jessica with Your Better Business Bureau, and we're kicking off another episode of the All Good Things with BBB podcast. This podcast is designed to help businesses right here in Central Illinois be better with advice and tips, stories from the experts right here in Central Illinois. Today, we're going to be kicking off a conversation with Tim Garrison of River City Roofing about how to build trust with your suppliers. Stay tuned. Welcome to another episode of the All Good Things with BBB podcast. I've got another BBB accredited business for you today. Tim Garrison of River City Roofing has been in Central Illinois for many years now and a longtime BBB accredited business. So walking the walk of our standards of trust. And we're going to talk to Tim today about how to build a relationship with your vendor. So obviously a lot of businesses working with outside parties to get the supplies and products that they use. How do you find the best of the best? So Tim here is going to talk to us about how he has found this success in his business. So welcome to the All Good Things with BBB podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
First of all, how did you start River City Roofing?
Oh, wow. Started as, so I worked at Keystone Steel and Wire out of high school. So 19 to 21, 22 years old. Knew the factory life was not for me. Wanted something more different, challenging, change of scenery every day type. Started doing siding and windows as a pastime, working with a crew that was working for a local company and just to kind of learn something while I was trying to figure out. And didn't take me very long. I realized, I could probably help that particular crew by managing or putting out a small phone book ad is what it was at the time. And it just took off from there. Started doing roofing in 2003. It was a little different than the siding and window arena, I would say, at the time locally. And it was more of a fit for me and the guys that I had at the time. So we just started incorporated in 2005, I think, and started, kind of more advertising only roofing at that time.
Roofing is one of those industries that requires obviously a license to do business. So if you're out there doing roofing without a license, you need to get one. So that requires, learning it really, really well to do it properly, right? We see complaints all the time from other businesses. We've got leaky roofs, shingles blowing off in these crazy winds we get here in the Midwest. So you've had a particular commitment to excellence from the beginning. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I think maybe every industry, but I found in the roofing industry, one, trust and doing what you say, backing up your work, that kind of stuff, just took off. I mean, I know they always say it's kind of the common thing is if you do something wrong, customers tell 10 people. If you do something right, they tell no one. I feel the roofing industry was slightly different to where it was almost like, hey, I found a trustworthy roofer. Mm-hmm. That's really what I would say. Some of the best decisions are just, standing behind your mistakes and taking care of it. But, the licensing, the OSHA, the things that, when you didn't come from a roofing company, everything was school of hard knocks. I mean, it was literally just trial and error. I didn't know what OSHA was the first time they showed up on our job site. So, it was probably in like 2002.
How did you handle it?
I handle it a lot different now. I can promise you that for sure. I learned a ton on my rights or at least what's required of me as an employer. But ultimately, I sat down after it. It was a $3,500 roof. We had $19,000 in fines. And $3,500 was material, labor, everything. So I had to look at myself and say, all right, what are we going to do? Am I going to figure this out or am I going to bow out? So we handled that, used as I do every mistake we use as a learning, an opportunity to learn and get better. And I started, going to classes, getting educated on what was required and roof, safety, fall protection. I know the codes very well to this day.
When you were first starting out, what was it like trying to find a vendor?
You kind of find out who the two or three vendors are in the area. There was definitely some trial and error, I guess, as far as how you deal with them.
Tell me about some of that. Like, what was your initial approach?
First, kind of like insurance or anything else, you kind of take local people from the industry that say, oh, this is where we get our insurance, this is where we get our supplies. So you just kind of fall in line. But what I learned early on is a paper trail. Actually, so many, especially in construction and roofing in particular, you don't have a paper trail. You call your supplier, you order something, and if it comes in wrong, who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
So you learn being organized and having that paper trail. This was before even a lot of texting and emailing at the time. So making sure that you do that. And I learned, big picture. I realized that some suppliers or maybe individuals at the suppliers could just push it on you. Hey, you ordered that wrong. You're going to eat it. There's decisions that are made on dealing with suppliers based off of that level of trust that you have to have. There's a couple of stories I could say. We solely GAF shingles for over 18 years, I'd say 16, 18 years, based off of doing the wrong color of shingle that I ordered correctly in Edgewild. I was at an auction buying a work truck in Florida. I get a call, hey, it's the wrong color of shingles, $7,500 in material. And I just couldn't lose, that would have crippled the business. I mean, I was less than a year in business. And they came out. I met now this is the manufacturer for GAF, the rep at Bob Evans in East Peoria. And he pulls out an old school checkbook and says, how much is it going to cost to replace that roof? You ordered it correctly. Here you go. That move there, or, that business decision from that manufacturer at that time got 18 years, 17 years of soul loyalty, from someone. They could have easily said, hey, too bad.
Yeah. What would
you ordered it wrong. You need to order the right color and replace it for the customer, Mm-hmm. I think that's lost with a lot of the big manufacturers. Nowadays, I mean, nobody's pulling out a checkbook. You got to go through so much red tape to get it, get a warranty approved or material that was ordered wrong. Mm-hmm. So I would say now it's even more important, really paper trail, keeping track and organized of who ordered what and when, signing off, kind of inspect what you expect on documentation.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Mm-hmm. Have you had a situation where you've had to kind of break up with a vendor per se, where they didn't meet your expectation?
I will say, and without naming anyone, on the flip side of that, there was 2 or 3 incidents very early on, maybe before that situation, and where they said, oh, you ordered it wrong, you're stuck with it. So ultimately there was about a $750 window that they told me, too bad. I knew I ordered the right one. I saw a pattern with the supplier. And one of my suppliers, I don't know, in the last 10 years mentioned to me, he said, contractors have a really long memory. And that rings so true. I mean, and for a vendor to realize that is very smart, in my opinion, because that $750 window, ultimately, they said, you're stuck with it. It sat in my shop. I sold it for a couple $100 probably years later. They were not a main supplier. They were just kind of as we needed them for 10, 15 years. I think having trust with your vendors is or with anyone you deal with, really, with employees, with customers, with vendors. Trust is number one. It's really a non-negotiable, for me. I mean, it's going to make you act out of character, act different. If you're dealing with people you don't trust, then I feel like you're going to be, making decisions that you wouldn't normally make. Do I tell them this? Do I not tell them? Do I have to, kind of show all my cards, kind of thing. So yeah.
Do you think it's easier now, since you've been in business over 20 years, that you kind of got that process down, and your reputation in the industry has limited those kind of lack of trust situations?
I do. I still will say, like I've never, and I never will get to the point where it's like, hey, kind of throwing your weight around, if you will, as far as, who's doing what kind of volume. And, but I definitely watch for it with, new management, new sales reps, new vendors, to see how they operate. Cause, to me, And I do that with every business, and you can usually tell a lot about a business, by some of those small decisions,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
How they treat you every step of the way, how they value your business.
Yep. And how they own mistakes. That's where I tell my guys, I'm like, as an employee to me as the owner, I'm still very involved. And I tell everybody, we're going to make mistakes. Let's just not make the same ones. Or then it's a choice, I learn from mistakes. That's how I built the business, literally on mistakes. So if somebody makes a mistake, just come tell me. I just ask the same of vendors.
Going back to maybe mistakes, how is it that, when the employee comes to you, hey, this didn't go right, how do you communicate it to your customer?
Usually head on, like this is what's going on. We just had a very, very huge mistake done last year on the product that you don't order all the time. So cedar shakes. Cedar is a very finicky type of product. It comes out of mills in British Columbia, and there's labels on them. But ultimately, the roof was done. The material was $55,000 just for the material. And I went, we've done this roof before, so this is our second time replacing this very expensive, very beautiful roof. And I went there, and as I get out to look at some copper, just, kind of a detail as the job is already almost completed, I realize a lot of the shakes don't look like premium shakes, and then there's levels, number 1, 2, or 3 kind of on the grade of wood that comes. And my client says, what do you think about the shakes? And I'm like, I don't think they look, you can just kind of tell there's like splinters and things hanging off. I said, well, let's look at the flashing. I gave him my honest opinion. I said, let me research where these shakes came from, what's going on. We've bought from the same mill for the last, I think when we did that roof 15 years prior. But what happened is I had an employee that kind of dropped the ball in ordering, went to our main supplier. He said, I can't get them for 6 or 8 weeks, because, there's just a process to getting the wood, treating it. So they ordered from another vendor. That vendor probably slid some subpar grade A material. So I had a decision to make. I'm like, I called him. I said, we'll meet in his driveway again. And I said, we need to replace the roof. It's a very lengthy process on that type. It's about a 6-day project. Very loud. Landscaping, dogs. People in the home. So there was a lot to. The client was great and understood, but face it head on, and there was really no other option. I'm even going a step further. We're having those shakes tested because I think they weren't even treated. So I'm hoping I got some recourse there. But
okay, so you're still dealing with vendors
on the backside, yes. Yeah. But the customer had no choice. It was like we have to do what's right.
Yeah.
And but that was probably the biggest dollar amount that I'm just like, yeah, let's face it. Usually they come up, if there's a leak or something we did wrong, that comes up 5 years later with, a lot of interior damage or something. You have to own those as well. But this one was like pretty painful, within a day of completing. But, I didn't have the right people up there inspecting the job and looking at the material. So it's some things that now we've changed some of our process and we'll learn from it.
Still learning.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a great example. But from a financial perspective, what advice would you give maybe a smaller or newer company to plan for those types of things?
You have to, I say it wasn't done here. Inspect what you expect. I should have had someone inspecting. I'm learning. I'm 22, 23 years and been really, closer to, I guess, 20, 24. Process manuals, playbooks. We're in the middle of finalizing a true operating, procedure manual for everything. If a truck breaks down, this is what you do. This is who you call. These are the vendors we use. If you're doing a project out of town, these are the tools, and how you would prep, where you're going to be staying, how you determine which hotel, and this is 100% based off mistakes we've made. We did a project in Indianapolis Motor Speedway 3 years ago. I was out of town, certain people, they said, hey, somebody walked in, told someone book a room and find a cheap room. So I would never, that's never something that would come out of my mouth. For one, wherever my crews are staying is where I would stay. But this was in a bad neighborhood, and we had 3 trucks wiped out of all the tools. But it's based right. I could have just looked at Google Maps and said, "What? I don't want my trucks here." You're looking for trouble. So we had $25,000 in tools stolen out of the trucks, and all this could have been eliminated by saying, "Hey, out of town, this is what you're following." When you go out of town, for one, half the tools in there didn't need to be in that truck or those trucks. I heard a podcast or something years ago and got me moving in this direction. They said contractors are the worst at this. They know everything. But if something happens to the main guy, the kids or employees cannot pick that up, and there's just too much that's in their head and not documented.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been a mission for the last 4 or 5 years, really just developing a process for everything. And early on, when I see young guys or young entrepreneurs, contractors that are already doing that, I know they're well ahead of me because that would have saved so many problems.
So your industry has some technology changes, different products, things like that. How have you over the years built the process to test a new product offering from one of your vendors before you give it out to your customer?
I have to use a product on my home, one of my employees' homes, family, something. I just can't push a product that I'm not comfortable and confident with. The next part of that, once I say, okay, I like the product, and however we did this with solar. We did it on 2 employees, my father's house, before we started installing it. The next thing I do then is I again, putting a little pressure on the supplier, whoever is, so whatever new products that we bring in, and I would recommend to anyone, especially in the contracting field, is I require that vendor or to send out their specialist on our first project, at least,
Nice.
first couple projects. So I want, if it's a 4-day project, I want that rep there and literally just use that. Any new product that comes out that we decide to bring on or to tackle a project, we require that. And
That's a great idea.
Use it as a training.
Yeah.
That job's not to make money. That's to learn to make sure that we're familiar with the products, and that usually closes any loopholes on warranties. So if I do the first one, go, hey, I don't, this is a little much. My guys aren't, well, at least I had a rep there. So I know that this one's warranted, cause you can only do so much in a classroom training. We have a little training area. You
got to get out
you don't
there
want
and
to
do
practice on customers' buildings and homes, but within reason, in the field training, you're just not going to beat it. So
Yeah, that's great advice. You talked a lot about trust and how that's the cornerstone of all of your relationships, with your customers, your employees, and your vendors, obviously aligning with your BBB accreditation. Can you talk about what that has done for your business so far?
I mean, trust is, like I said, it in almost every relationship, and it starts with, in-house executive team, management team, the employees, and then with our customers. I mean, it is such an asset that, I mean, that's what has built the business. I literally can remember almost every job that I sold, back in 03, because someone trusted me, and I just, and I
means
think
a lot.
It is. That was a driver, and it just made, when you start a business, all you're looking for is someone to trust you,
Give you a chance.
Yep, that's it. So once people do, and that they shouldn't, and I'm just a kid with a truck or whatever, to me, you just can't lose sight of that. So, and it falls with your vendors too, like we talked about. I compare everything really in management to like a sports team. You got to be able to trust that your teammates are putting in the effort, and that they're pushing the same direction, and that you're all in it for the same goal and putting in, so if there's no trust, I don't care how valuable a relationship is monetarily, like that doesn't matter to me at all. If there's no trust, then or even a breach of trust, usually is going to be a huge factor for me.
Yeah. How do you handle those situations?
I try and weigh out, I guess, addressing it head on, try and figure it out. I know I've learned that sometimes I wasn't setting the right expectations, whether it's with a vendor, with an employee. So trying to correct that first and make sure, hey, is it, looking in the mirror, is it my issue? who really caused this? Did I I see how we got here? And then, straight on conversations, try and have those conversations and see if it's something that can be resolved and repaired. And then if it isn't, there's that long memory that us contractors have.
Never forget. Never forget.
I have a question from the back.
Yeah.
How many employees do you have?
We're right at 40.
40?
Yes.
Okay. So when you go through the hiring process, because trust is so huge with you, is there ever anything that kind of is a red flag and you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
this one wouldn't be a
Absolutely.
good person?
Yeah. We're getting better, much better at, I've made some key hires, some really great hires in the last year or more. And helping with teaching me to be a better, leader, as well as interviewing was not my strong suit ever. And I am learning. We've got some really good questions, just to see if someone is going to try and fake it till they make it, or if they're actually going to. And that tells me enough, because I try and be an open book. I'm like, look, if you have, it's not really on what I mean, we can train most of that. I feel it's willingness to work. Do you fit the culture? Are you looking to improve and get better? That's one of our key things. Our company model is changing lives while changing roofs. By changing roofs, we're changing lives of our employees, of our customers, of our employees' families. That's my goal. You can tell a lot in the interview process or very early on. And that's one key line that I tell people. I'm like, we're going to learn this in the next 60 days. So let's just be honest now, because it's going to come out. You can fake it, but let's not waste 60 days of both of our careers, trying to make it, fake it into a fit. But yeah, no, I think, there's some things that have happened in interviews where we're like, yep, glad we asked that question. And, we can tell this person's not honest or wouldn't own mistakes, and that to me is huge. Cause like I said, we're going to expand, we're going to get bigger. We're now, going into other regions, and we're going to make mistakes. That's part of it. It's a matter of learning and wanting to get better.
So for the kid, you 26 years ago, looking to get into home improvement now, what would be your recommendation?
Oh man. I didn't realize how important, some of the networking or even the trade shows, can be. They can also be a big waste of time. I've learned that, this many years. I'm learning to be, very intentional with a 3 or 4 day seminar, right? Because you can always, free dinners or we're past that, as a vendor or a supplier. I don't need that. I want to make sure that we're on the same page doing, with our vision, our business plans, where we're going, where we're headed. And we don't want to have those conversations, in the middle of the year. I try and at least go by every quarter. I want to know who we're dealing with, what we're doing, pricing. I mean, everything's moving. I would say that type of, again, the process manual, instead of just saying what you want done, just documenting it. It could start off in a notebook, but having those processes for hiring, for training, for obviously scaling and growing the business, it's invaluable. I wish I'd have known that before you're 20. So.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And it takes some pressure off of you as to having to communicate all the time what the expectation is or how to do it right.
100%.
Yeah.
Another thing I would say for starting, and it's really hard. I listen to some Dave Ramsey. It's not a Dave Ramsey 100%. I don't know if you can do it without a credit card, but I do say using your own money. Still do it to this day. If we do a huge project, I'm going to invest some of that right when I get the contract. We may buy some more, if we need safety equipment or an additional truck or whatever it is. But I've never been big on deposits. I would separate deposits, because I think that gives you a false sense of security in operating a business when you're not looking at whose money is yours, what is money you've actually earned. So I think there's some real value into, using your own money and not starting with $100,000 credit line, a small business. I think
Make decisions differently.
you do. Yeah. I've always said that, as far as with clients, I'm like, we've never made a big insurance claim on damage, for general liability. I don't think I've ever had a claim. but we've had some major leaks and some major damage, and we've wrote some major checks to fix it. I learn, that's how I learn. You pay for those mistakes. It's painful. It hurts. The OSHA, that type of stuff. You
learn to plan for it.
I learned, yeah. I learned real fast when I hand over all the money I made that year or whatever it was back then. So yeah.
It probably changes your management style as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Got to be really particular about that communication and the trust.
It is. And inspecting what you expect. And I do have people in the organization that would have walked up and now it's on a checklist. Are we checking the product, before it's put on? Because obviously the roofers are going to start installing, if you put it there. So,
yeah.
That's where I'm at now, working on the business is more whiteboard. And that's where I want to be, because that's how we solve problems. Let's not talk about this issue, instead of being reactive, let's be proactive and start figuring out how can we fix this, process instead of fixing the problem.
Yeah. So, very good. Excellent advice.
Yeah, it's working well.
Well, we're so proud to have you guys as a BBB accredited business for so many years now, building trust all along the way with your customers, vendors, community, all of those things. Big into giving back, especially in the fall, right? You do the roof for the veterans.
The veterans, yep. That started in 2017, and it's just a great day. I mean, it's always awesome to see the veterans, if they're still with us, their family, to hear about some of the sacrifices that they were made. And now my oldest is 21. He's in the Army, so it hits a little closer to home now. I did not serve, and you don't realize what the families go through, sending off a loved one, in any form or fashion, to join the military.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine back then when it was, hey, they're headed to Vietnam.
Just go.
Yeah. So, no, it's a huge respect that I've always had, but it's nice to actually to be able to express it and show them, and we don't do it for publicity, but it's nice when has a domino effect and other people, kind of
get on board with it.
Yeah, get on board and show respect for the holiday and for our veterans and that type of stuff. So
very good.
I think it's cool.
Well, we hope you learned something today with Tim Garrison of River City Roofing right here in Central Illinois, longtime BBB accredited business, about how to build trust with your vendors and how to build those relationships going on forward with your business. If you've got any questions, please let us know. We'd be happy to put you in contact with Tim. But thanks for watching another video of the All Good Things with BBB podcast.